Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to be talking about some comics, just an old-fashioned comic talk episode. I have not talked about a lot of the comics I've been reading for the last month or so. I've done a couple reviews in March on YouTube. You can check those out. But instead of going through the long list of comics that I've read in this last month or so, I decided to just pick out a few of the highlights and talk about those here. And see, let's see, the first up is The Answer. This is number 4. This is a limited series. This is 4 of 4. This is by Mike Norton and Dennis Hopeless. The story's by them. Mike Norton did the art. Dennis Hopeless did the actual writing on it. This is a very interesting comic in that if you look at the cover here, you know, the answer is the guy in the suit with the exclamation point for that's on his face, but the title is The Answer, right? Well, the story is really not about the answer, not the character in the book. The answer to the protagonist's dilemma. Let's see here. Her name is Devon. Should have remembered that. Okay, so Devon is the main character of the story. I've talked about this title before on a previous podcast, but since it was ending, I wanted to take a look at it again. And it's an interesting comic in that Devon is not your typical damsel in distress. She's in a bad situation, and you know someone's trying to hurt her or at least manipulate and use her, but she is not your typical, like I said, damsel in distress. So she takes charge of what's going on. She's asking the right questions, or at least trying to get to some semblance of the truth from the characters that she's interacting with. In the meantime, this character, The Answer, keeps popping into her life and ostensibly is trying to save her from the quote-unquote bad guys, which at first, in the first part of the story, issues 1 and 2 thereabouts, you think that maybe the supposed bad guys really aren't bad guys, but actually, at least the guy behind the curtain turns out actually to be the bad guy. And I should have prefaced this before. If you haven't read this title or any of these comics I'm talking about, I probably will be spoiling at least some aspects of it. So be warned. Let's see. So in this issue, Devon actually finds out what's been going on and why. And the guy behind the corporation that she's become a part of, that has offered her a job and all the resources and research that something that really fits along with what she likes to do. She's a librarian, but she has like a genius level ability to solve puzzles and figure out things. And it turns out that in the end, what this is all about is that when she was much younger, she was able to, 10 years old, I think it was. I can't remember exactly what her age was, but she was really young. But she was able to decode this ancient text and opened a portal to another dimension, it looks like. This was seen by I think at that time he was a janitor at the museum where this book was, and he saw this, and he then proceeds for the next 15, 20 years trying to build up, or basically trying to get Devon and get him access to this portal, this text. And of course Devon thinks that this whole thing, that experience in the museum is kind of like a nightmare, and she's had recurring dreams about this over time, and to her it's just a very frightening thing. But of course she confronts it with the usual strength that this character has been shown, and basically the guy is able to open the portal, and he wants Devon to join him as some sort of Adam and Eve, going into the portal and coming back out of it, I guess, to remake the world. Of course, The Answer shows up and spoils everything, and Devon is able to close the portal. And then you think it's over, but it's really not. Devon ends up going home. Oh well, she escapes. She's attacked, but then this guy shows up along with the answer, and he gets the answer gets killed in the portal. It's this very kind of gruesome scene where the bad guy is, and I can't remember his name, sorry, but the bad guy he's turned into this he's got tentacles, and there was this bit before about a squid in the title having to do with Devon, and so it all kind of relates in some way. It is like a puzzle. It's like all these little pieces that you're trying to fit together, and in the end, everything does fit together to a certain degree with the story, and I really like that aspect of it. Again, I liked. Well, let me get back to that in a second. But what I enjoyed about the ending is that you kind of get sort of an ending. You think it's done, but it's really not. And the guy is basically the bad guy survives. Or at least his organization does. You actually see him in a news report as the guy that Devon left with, who is a companion of the Answer, who actually turned out to be a security guard who rescued Devon from that portal, that situation, and he and the Answer have been protecting her from this bad guy for the last 15 or 20 years, whatever it's been, But the bad guy or his organization, I'm unclear about that part of it. But they blow up Devon's library, and that really pisses her off. And so the Answer shows up again, protecting her from the hired guns of this corporation or organization. And she decides, you know what, I'm through, being a pawn in this situation, and she just kind of walks off into the night all by herself. And it's not the end. I think this is coming back. If the sales were good enough on this, and I kind of hope they were, I'd like to see more of this. Like I said, I really enjoyed the depiction of Devon as a very independent, strong-willed female character in a situation where she doesn't necessarily rely on the male superhero to save her. And that has been the strongest point of this series so far. The fact that the superhero character, which is kind of it's kind of the draw, I guess, for us superhero readers. In Dark Horse, this is from Dark Horse. Dark Horse is doing more superhero type stuff. This is one of them, but it's not about the superhero. And if this book continues, I really, really, really hope that they do not make the Answer more or make him the main focus of the series. I hope Devon continues to be the Batman to the Answer's Robin, so to speak. So if you haven't checked this out, and I haven't spoiled it too much for you, you should check this out when it comes out on trade, or maybe pick up the back issues if you can. But it was a very entertaining story. I was very surprised at what it turned out to be, considering the solicitations that I read about it. So that's the Answer. Next up, and these are in alphabetical order. There's no order in terms of like the time that the release date that I read these, but here we go. This is Danger Club number 5. Danger Club is back, yes, because I love this comic so much. I've talked about this several times in the podcast. This is by Landry Walker, Eric Jones, and Michael Drake, Rusty Drake. And so this comic started a while ago. It started last year. We're only up to issue 5. And why is that? You ask? Well, it's because Mr. Drake's kids, he has 2 kids, and they were in an awful automobile accident, and they've been recovering from that. Of course, that meant that he could not spend as much time working on the colors for this comic, and I believe everybody decided between Mr. Walker and Jones and Image Comics, which is this is from, they decided that they would delay release of these issues until Drake could catch up, and I thought that was a very admirable thing. The only problem with that is that, or my fear with that, is that this title lost a bunch of readers because it was coming out infrequently, which is very unfortunate if that's the case, because this is a damn fine comic book. It's right up my alley. It's teen superheroes. I love that stuff. I've talked about this before on the podcast. I love the teen superhero aspect of it. This is not your 1980s New Teen Titans, though, although it does. There are certain riffs on that theme, that trope of teen superhero groups, because this is a very violent and bloody story. But it's for some reason it's really captured my attention and my imagination, and I'm doing everything that I can to promote it because I really love this book. I don't want to talk too much about this because I really, really want you to go get the trade if you haven't. That's issues 1 through 4, and that just came out recently as well. And then issue number 5 just came out. But what you get in here, and like I said, I'm not going to talk too much specifics because I want you to enjoy this book as I have, where you're just reading along and you're surprised and delighted and blown away by what's in here. But the bad guy of this story reveals what he is planning to do, and it's really funny because to some degree there is a certain amount of commonality between this and the answer, having to do with portals and entering the portal and remaking the world. I'm sure that's just coincidence. That's a common science fiction trope anyway. But it's in Danger Club too, and I believe I read this one before the answer number 4. I think maybe my memory sucks, so I don't know. And I'm not going to go look at it right now. Let's see. So anything else? The lead character, the lead teen superhero, Kid Vigilante. I will spoil this part. No, wait, I won't. Never mind. Something happened to him in issue 4 that I went, wow, how are they gonna get out of this? How are they gonna continue with this? And I think I know how they're gonna do it. There's something shown, I think, in issue 3 involving clones, perhaps. But I'm saying too much now. But if Kid Vigilante is not active going forward in this title, I'll be very disappointed because what an interesting character. Basically, his superpower is he's always right. He's kind of like Batman in that way. This is such a wonderful comic, wonderful story, wonderful art by Mr. Jones, and the colors. I really have to give props, and I think I've said this before, but it bears repeating. Mr. Drake is doing a fantastic job on this. There's so much. I don't know, the colors really pop. They're really alive on the page. They're very vibrant, and I really enjoy that. It's a much needed look at. That's not the right. I'm not saying that right. I just really enjoy it. It's different from what I'm seeing in other comic books across all different companies. And if you compare the coloring in the answer, it's much more typical of comic books. Not to say that it's bad or anything. The color artist did a good job on that. But I don't know. Drake is really pulling out all the stops on this. If I had to choose my favorite color artist out of everything that I'm reading right now, I'd have to choose him based on 5 issues of a comic I'm really loving, and you should too. Go check it out. And maybe I will down the road. Maybe I will do an in-depth review of this. We'll see. All right. Next up, East of West, and I have the first 2 issues of this. This is by Jonathan Hickman, one of my favorite writers right now. Dragotta and Martin are the other 2 creators involved in this. And when I saw this in previews, this is a few months ago now, I thought, this sounds like an intriguing story, but not enough to get me into, or not enough to convince me to buy it. But I saw it in my local comic shop on Free Comic Book Day, and I almost bought them because I heard from other folks that it's really good. Travis, my usual co-host on the podcast, I believe he liked that. We haven't talked about it, but I think on his YouTube channel I saw him talking about that, and he really enjoyed it. I read the first 2 issues, and I immediately emailed my comic book shop guy, Matt, and told him to add that to my pull list because it's really good. It's very interesting. So you get this alternate history of America where the Civil War did not end the way that it happened in our history books. You get, at the very beginning, you get this, you get the horsemen of the apocalypse showing up. Only one of them's missing, and Death is the one that's missing, and he's off doing his own thing, while the other horsemen, who have resurrected as, I believe, children, and so that's kind of horrific for what they do to people as they encounter them as children. There's this intriguing plot line going on. I'm not quite sure where it's going or what's going to happen necessarily, but it's like I said, I like the alternate history aspect of it. I like you can't get much more, or the stakes much higher than the apocalyptic horsemen showing up and causing trouble there. So we'll see where that goes, but so far I'm really enjoying it. It's Jonathan Hickman, so I should have just said, okay, I should buy it anyway. But the guy he's putting out a lot of stuff recently, including his Marvel titles. And while I enjoy it, it's just like I need to stop buying so many comics. Not necessarily stop reading so many comics, but buying so many comics, because my pocketbook is not liking all the great stuff that I'm reading. But that's my, how do they say that? That's my row to hoe, I guess. Right? I'll be touching back on East of West in the future just to talk about it some more. But yeah, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So anyway, a book that I didn't really enjoy all that much. That's Idolized. It ended with issue number 5. If you've seen the covers, you can get a normal, just an artist drew them. But what they did with this, and this is the reason that I bought this series to begin with, and I normally don't do this, but I saw the covers and they were photo covers, and they hired a model and they made a suit. It's kind of a white suit with this circular stuff and patterns on there. And anyway, but the character here, oh boy, I should have looked this up. I believe her name is Jewel in it. So she has electrical powers. But so they have this model on all these covers, and I bought all the covers that had the model. I bought those. Now, okay, like I said, I saw the covers, and I'm like, ooh, what is this, right? The premise, however, is that it's kind of like an American Idol type situation, and there's a few of those stories that have kind of cropped up in the last few years, and I've avoided them, except for this one because of the covers. And like I said, I don't normally just buy a comic based on the cover alone, but I did on this one, and I have to say, you cannot read this comic. I will tell you right now, don't even bother. The premise wasn't the reason. It's really, I have to say, on this is by David Schwartz, Pasquale Calano, and David Curiel. The writing of this is really subpar, I have to say. It's very, I don't know, it's there's nothing really special about it. The story they're telling, it's a tale of revenge. Jewel's parents died from this one guy, this one superpowered being, and she decides that the only way to get her revenge on this guy is to win this competition, because the prize is that she joins, basically their version of the Justice League. And that alone was kind of enough to keep me going on it. Plus, it was a limited series, only 5 issues. But then I got to the 5th issue. The 5th issue is a lot of talk, a lot of exposition, a lot of third-person narration, a lot of telling, and not a lot of showing, which for a comic book is really, to me, anathema to what a comic book is. So, big fail for me on this series, especially how it ended. So, I mean, other than the covers, boy, I really can't recommend this series at all. I hate to say that. I hate to be so negative, but it was not good. So, unlike Danger Club and The Answer, stay away from Idolized in trade form if you were curious at all. And you know what? That's just my opinion. Go check it out for yourself. I'm sure there's probably issues online, digitally at least you can read, probably for cheaper than what I spent. Maybe 99 cents per issue, if that's what the price is. That might be worth it. I don't know. You'll have to decide. All right, next up, the recently released series Jupiter's Legacy by Mark Miller and Frank Quitely. Wow. Jupiter's Legacy. So, the writer of Kick-Ass and the artist of All-Star Superman joined forces to create the greatest superhero epic of this generation. And the tagline is, Chloe and Brandon are the children of the world's greatest heroes. Can they ever fill their shoes? Okay. Join forces to create the greatest superhero epic of this generation. Wow. I know Mark Miller is, he's the hype master. I mean, he's kind of like the 21st century Stan Lee in that regard, but I don't know that they've quite met the bar they've set for themselves. Frank Quitely, I understand Frank Quitely, you either like his work or you don't. I do, and really Quitely was a big part of the draw for me picking up this book. Miller, I like his ideas. I think he has great concepts, but his execution of those concepts has pretty much left me disappointed with everything that I've read of his. His Super Crooks miniseries just recently, I actually like that. That was probably the best story of his that I've read recently. I have the Superior trade, and I haven't read that yet, so I'm hoping that does not disappoint. But what was the series he did? Oh gosh, it's escaping me. But it was basically if Batman was a bad guy. Man, watch. As I talk about some other things, it'll come to me, and I'll just blurt it out then. So just in case that happens, be forewarned. But anyway, I can't remember the name of that book, but man, I hated that one. Hated it. I couldn't believe I wasted all that money on that title. Okay, but back to this book, Jupiter's Legacy. This started out really, really cool. I thought it starts out in 1932, and the characters in their they're probably in their mid to late 20s at this point. But the main guy, he decides that he needs to go to this island, which sounds very Lost-esque, right? But he has dreams about this island, and the island speaks to him, and he convinces his friends to go halfway across the world to go to this island. And basically this island gives them superpowers, and we don't know exactly why or what's going on there. But that whole sequence that was set in the past, this is a good, 6 pages or so of it. I really enjoyed that, and I'm kind of hoping that we see more of that as time goes on, where they do these flashbacks. And then we go into modern day, March 2013 to be specific, and here are the children of those characters from 1932. Apparently, they get their superpowers, they're long-lived. We actually do see those same characters from 1932 as older characters. I got to be careful how I say that, as I myself am getting old. Let's see. So they're the original superheroes, if you will, are dealing with a particular villain that they've encountered before, and the children who are supposed to be helping aren't. They're way too cool. They're way too hipster for this kind of superhero stuff, and they have their issues, and they're complaining. There is this really cool scene though where the the original superheroes, I'll just refer to them in that way, are beating up on the bad guy, and one of them basically psychically links with the bad guy and brings him into this world that he's created. Let's see, what does he say here? This is a beach holiday I had as a 6-year-old. It took me weeks to assemble this level of detail, and it is. It's like a painting that's come to life that they're inhabiting, and this is probably one of the best things. Let's see here. I thought it might be nice to go somewhere tranquil while my brother demolishes your physical form. Would you like some cake while we're waiting? I think it's this is. I do have to admit, Miller can do some nice dialogue. To be honest, it's actually pretty grisly. I think Sheldon's hitting you with a car right now, but he shouldn't be more than another few seconds. Just wait here and try not to think about it. I think they just snapped your backbone. And the villain's just slumped down on his knees on the shoreline and just says, "Oh God." It's just that 1.5 pages where they show that scene was almost worth the price of the comic alone. Frank Quitely art's really good. It's Frank Quitely. Although I have to admit he's not really doing anything special here. There's a lot of people talking in panels. But it looks nice. Oh, the daughter, the issue ends with the daughter after having sniffed some otherworldly cocaine or whatever it is they're calling it, and she just basically collapses, and that's how the issue ends. Like I said, it's just superhero children complaining about their lives, and it's like the poor spoiled rich kid, right? That syndrome. I will continue to read this. At least, what I try to do is give a title, 3 to 6 issues to convince me I should continue on with it. It's early on. We'll see how it goes, but I am interested in, especially in the origin, this island, what happened, why they have superpowers. I actually don't really care about the kids just yet. They're just spoiled brats so far. Poor woe is me. The world doesn't understand me. My mother doesn't understand me. My father doesn't get me. Blah 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 blah. But we'll see. I'm sure something will turn around on this story. It has to, otherwise I won't be reading it much longer. Okay, that's Jupiter's Legacy. Next up is another surprise for me, and I'll explain why in a second. That is Mara. I believe it's a limited series. I'm pretty sure it is. This is by Brian Wood, Ming Doyle, Jordi Belair. This is the story about Mara, who is a superstar volleyball player in this somewhat futuristic, slightly futuristic world where superstar athletes are, I guess maybe not so futuristic. It's kind of like now, where superstar athletes are considered, almost godlike. And she is. She's beloved the world over. That maybe that's the difference between our society and this one, as depicted, because she's loved by the world over. She's an inspiration to younger people all over the world. She's well sponsored. She's very rich in that regard. And the crux of it, though, is that she, for some reason, ends up with superpowers. She just suddenly gets superpowers where I believe she can fly. She's super fast. I think that was the superpower that first showed up, was that she became super fast. Anyway, so the first couple, this is issue 4 that I have talking about here, but the first couple issues, it's showing that world and her place in it. And then she the first issue, I believe, ended with her getting the superpowers. The second issue ends with, deals with the fallout of that. So basically, instead of celebrating the fact that she has superpowers, where it's kind of like that's kind of how superheroes are depicted, especially in mainstream comics. If you become a superhero, and I guess I should qualify that as well, because it's more of a DC thing than a Marvel thing. But if you get superpowers and I'm extrapolating a little bit here, but where Mara is already loved by the public, you would think that everybody would embrace that and maybe even take advantage of that to some degree, given her sponsorships and whatnot. But no, everybody looks at her with suspicion. The sponsors start to drop. She ends up basically in the grip of the government, who blackmail her using her brother, and that's the basic plot so far. I have to say, I was really, like I said, I was really surprised by how much I like this comic, and the reason, because it's written by Brian Wood. Now, Travis would respond to this saying I'm crazy, as he often does, because there are certain writers that I just don't care for, that he thinks are really good. And this is one of them. Brian Wood has been one of those writers who seem to get a lot of attention, a lot of respect for their work, and I just don't get it. He's okay. I read what's the latest book that he's working on? Oh, drat! I'm The Massive. I think that's it. It's just, I can recognize his ability, his skill as a writer in crafting a story. It's just, I just don't care for it, unfortunately. But Mara, I do like. I have enjoyed this. Like I said, surprisingly so. It's a little too much plot over character for me. I like to see a little bit more interaction with Mara and other characters. Not that there isn't in this, but it's almost superficial to some degree. I like to see Wood go just a little bit more in depth, but this, like I said, I think it's a limited series, so I'm not sure how much he could do that. This could have been very easily an ongoing series, and maybe that's what they're going to do. This is by Image. We'll see how that goes, I guess. But obviously it depends on how this ends up. But I could see myself buying this long term. So, if you like sports, if you like the cult of personality or examination thereof, you should check this out. I actually don't think, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think that Wood really needed to bring in that whole superpower aspect of it. I think there was a good enough story set up in the whole idea of her being a really good sportsman, really good at her craft, and have something else happen. But this is the story that we have. Like I said, I enjoyed it. So here we go again. Something that I thought I would like and wasn't pleasantly surprised. And this is The Movement. This is by DC, specifically by Gail Simone and Freddie Williams II. So this is one half of the dual companion books. You have The Movement and The Green Team. And as it says on the cover, no longer outcasts, no longer misfits, they are the movement. And based on the reactions I read online, especially on Tumblr, because I follow Gail Simone on Tumblr, this was like the second coming of something. And then I read it. So I basically read the reactions first, and then read the comics. So maybe, I guess you could say that may have tainted my view of this. But certainly wasn't the second coming for me. It was really just kind of disappointing. It was really meh for me. A pretty basic plot. These kiddish or young superheroes, I should say, or superpowered people. I'm not sure if they're superheroes, but they're protecting this certain area of the city, in a city where the cops are corrupt and there's all this corruption, and Gail, I think, is really trying to tie into the whole 99% versus 1%, that economic argument. And while I don't mind that aspect of it, it's just there were no characters in here that appealed to me beyond just their function of the plot, which isn't much in here, quite honestly. So I think, like I said, this is my qualification. I think I'm reacting more to the response to the comic, the story, from other people than I am perhaps of what I've read, or it's tainted it in like I said, in some way, because it certainly wasn't. It didn't move me like I thought perhaps it would based on the reaction. All right. I will, however, continue to read this for the least. Like I said, I usually give a comic 3 to 6 issues. But boy, it certainly didn't grab me out of the gate like, some other number ones from DC, especially, Earth 2 really grabbed me. Nothing else coming to mind right now. But anyway, there you go. There's that, the movement. And finally I have here another number one. This is Suicide Risk by Mike Carey and Alana Casagrande. And I did talk about this. I can't remember if I talked about this on the podcast or if it was just on one of the YouTube videos I did, talking about comics. I think it was that. I think it was on the YouTube video where I was just talking about comics that I had ordered and what I was looking forward to based on things that are previews. Or maybe it was that previews episode. I don't know. Anyway, short-term memory problems. Or maybe that's long-term. I don't know. I can't remember. I should cut that part out. Anyway, so Suicide Risk. So what does a cop do as the main character in a world where there are superpowered people? And you think, isn't that what Powers is about? Well, yeah, kinda. And that was my fear of this, was that this was a kind of Powers-esque, a Powers light, or no, that's not the right way to say it either. But it'd be too much like Powers. That's really what I'm trying to say. And so basically the comic is this cop who is in a situation where there's all these superpower beings and they're killing people and killing cops, and he ends up coming out of it alive. His partner gets severely, well, I think he gets his arm torn off, if I remember correctly. So, how does that affect him? And there's this scene in the comic where he goes home, and there's I think a birthday party or some sort of get-together. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the details. I should have looked at this before I started recording. But, you see, he's kind of reacting as we've seen in cop shows and movies, perhaps, where cops, they don't react emotionally to it, other than perhaps anger. He's not broken because of it. He's not, sobbing uncontrollably about the situation. In fact, he comes across kind of numb about it, which that may be accurate. I don't know if that's the best way to involve your reader in your main character is for him to come across as aloof and uncaring. And it's not that he's necessarily uncaring 100%, but it's very controlled. And that may be just part of his personality. We don't know yet. I don't know yet because it's only the first issue. But there is a scene where he goes home and his wife tries to not console him, but I'm not sure quite how to describe it. But anyway, she tells him she's going to show him a good time, and I think, and what I got out of it, what I pulled out of that was that this was her way of coping with this horrific situation where this could have been her husband that died or been dismembered, or something terrible happened to him, and it didn't. So this is her way of showing him how much she cares about him, by not being the typical. I say this again based on cop shows and movies I've seen. So I'd actually really like to know how does a real life couple, one of whom is a cop, how does the spouse deal with this situation? I'm very interested to know how various people deal with these real life tragedies like that. This is real life. You know what I mean, though. Cops deal with horrific things many times, shootings and and accidents where they come across that kind of stuff. That's got to affect him. It has to some degree. I mean, I understand the idea of shutting down that part of you so that you can function. That makes sense as a coping mechanism. So turn that around again to the spouse. How does the spouse deal with that kind of stuff? How does the spouse cope with it? And in this case, the wife isn't crying. She's not what's the word I'm looking for here? Anyway, I think you can get what I'm going after here. But so anyway, there's a scene where they make love, but then the guy gets up and goes. Basically, he's trying to figure out how these people got their superpowers and stop that from happening more. In the end, he does come across some people who have this little device with this glowing sphere on the end of it, and he basically forces them to administer this superpower thing to him, and that's kind of how the issue ends. So I bought this one because it's Mike Carey. He's one of my favorite writers. Despite my misgivings about this being like another Powers clone title, and secondarily I bought it because it was a cop dealing with superpowers, and how my thought was how does he deal with that? And again, this is kind of like Powers to some degree, but I have trusted Mike Carey to not do that. And I would think that, and this is by Boom, I would think that Boom Studios would be concerned about that as well, but who knows? But then at the end, he gets touched by that device, and if he's developing superpowers, then I don't know, what's the point? It's just another super powered person going after other super powered people, and I get that enough in the other comics I read. So I'm really concerned about where this is going and how long I'll be reading it. So I like I said, it's by Mike Carey, so I'm going to give him a huge benefit of the doubt. But we'll see. I guess we'll see. All right, so that's a bunch of comics that I've wanted to highlight from the last month or so of comics that I've read. I read about, 15 to 20 of these things every week. But there's, with everything that goes on in my life and how many comics I have to read, I can't always do a weekly review. So this was my answer to that predicament. Anyway, so let me know what you think about these titles or my opinions of these titles. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to leave feedback on this episode, please do so by emailing longboxreview@gmail.com. You can also leave voicemail at 208-953-1841. You can also leave comments at the blog for individual episodes at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Please rate and review the podcast on iTunes. You can also find Longbox Review on Stitcher. The Longbox Review podcast is a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.